Hi all, Rick here. What is clearly shown on screen and referenced is the first contact between humans and Vulcans, several times in fact in several different universes. However, while this is cited as the beginning of our interstellar story in Star Trek, that galaxy is host to a number of other species and powers older, younger and all across the stars that each is their own tale of development. So I thought in this video, as a bit of fun, I could look into the known first contacts with alien life for other prominent species in the galaxy. As a disclaimer, I'll display the beta sign when I'm referencing a non-canonical event, as we don't really have enough concrete information on all of these from just the shows. Additionally, I'm not going to lie, things get a lot less interesting after the Federation gets on the scene, as so many of these first contacts from then on end up being with the UFP, who of course adopted the Vulcans' first contact stipulations when it was founded, and therefore are quick to reach out to many fledgling species. Oh, and finally, of course any initial meeting between two powers is designated a first contact, but I'm looking at the first contacts. According to apocryphal stories, the Vulcans' first contact was with a species called the Atosha. Around the time of Awakening, the Atosha just landed outside of the capital city of Shakar, and they met diplomatically with the Vulcan government. In the midst of its time of reform, the Vulcans had yet still to fully embrace the path of qo'nos, the purging of emotion, but many were trying to do better. Unfortunately, these Atosha then revealed themselves to be nefarious pirates who wanted to hold the planet ransom by capturing the leadership. This did not go well, as the Vulcans immediately turned back to conflict and found the enemy had no protection against their psionic abilities. Thus they managed to create a myriad of implanted commands and captured Atoshans, and even employed the unified psychic attacks on their fleets and ships, and this unforeseen edge allowed them to drive away the Atosha in an event known as the hur'q, after which the Vulcans went back to internal conflicts until the sundering occurred shortly thereafter. This was when those who marched beneath the Raptor's wings decided to leave Vulcan in the face of hur'q's reforms, and they set out in primitive interstellar ships to find a new home. By the time Vulcan had become an interstellar power, they had fully adopted their more peaceful approach, and instigated their own rule set in preparation for when they would be the ones to encounter new life. They would not see the same violence done to them enacted by their own hands, and so created their mandates for first contact, a legacy that would then be passed down to the Federation. However, that is the benevolent approach to such a tumultuous first contact. Others took a different lesson away. According to Klingon history, their first contact with alien life went on to enforce their warrior ethos and early expansionist imperialism. Around the 1300s, qo'nos was invaded by aliens from the Gamma Quadrant. Exactly what they looked like and how they got to the Beta Quadrant is not yet included in canon, but what is known is that these aliens are simply called the Outsiders, or hur'q in Klingonese. They attacked all across the planet in an attempt to round up prisoners, valuables and harvest the homeworld of its resources. In part, they were successful, however, the Klingons were nowhere near as an easier target as the hur'q had hoped, and were eventually driven off by the pre-warp society of warrior houses. Now, the dates of all of this seem to conflict, with some saying that Klingons had developed warp around the mid-20th century, while other sources claim they had it much longer. It could be that they commandeered hur'q drives, and had a few warp ships alongside early sublight drives for centuries before developing their own warp tech. But the repelling of such acts taught the Klingons a lesson they would not soon forget, that the galaxy out there was dangerous, and they had been right to hone their combat prowess amongst themselves. Now that alien life was confirmed, the Klingon Empire steeled itself to confront the hostile universe, and when they achieved warp flight, they set out with aggression in mind to conquer those they encountered before they themselves were conquered. Unfortunately, this then means that the Klingon Empire pretty much acted as the hur'q had done to them, as they had no prime directive, and soon inter-house competition drove the Klingons to target less advanced planets to exploit them. So for many pre-warp people in proximity to qo'nos, the Klingon Empire became their first point of contact with alien life, and it was similarly combative. These mark one of the many ways in which first contact can happen when alien life visits unannounced. Not all such interactions are as dire, however, such as the first contact with the Trill. The Trill have an interesting one in beta canon lore. They are one of the first species who developed subspace communications before they developed warp drive. Because of this creation, they tuned into the background noise of the galaxy, eager to observe things at faster-than-light speeds at last, only to discover the cacophony of noise from countless species, all communicating across subspace frequencies and transmitting data all around. The Trill learned very quickly that the universe was apparently alive and full of sentient life, it's just never been detectable because of all the communication being done through subspace layers, which were undetectable to contemporary machines. This realization had a similar effect to their culture as Earth's did with the Vulcans. While some were panicked, the majority saw that spacefaring life could be attained, and they were definitely not alone out there. As a result, the planet entered into an age of cooperation. Because they were already aware of interstellar life, the Vulcans deemed first contact with the Trill long overdue, and bent their rules to meet the species. By the time the Vulcans met with the Trill had become a single planetary government ahead of even developing warp drive, an order of events seldom witnessed. However, the Trill did not want to establish ties with anyone for the moment, adopting a more isolationist stance and actively began broadcasting in subspace to warn people away from their home system. This isolationism eventually waned, and by the early 22nd century the Trill were warp capable and had entertained visitors from several worlds. The Andorians are reputed to have begun their interstellar exploration around the 1700s with sublight ships. In 1875, the Romulan Emperor, Itallius, discovered their homeworld and attempted to annex it for Romulus. Naturally, a battle ensued, and by sheer luck and tenacity, the Andorians prevailed, downing the Romulan vessel. All aboard eventually perished in the frigid atmosphere of Andoria, but technically this was the first contact with sentient life the Andorians had. However, they had suspected such existed for a while beforehand, with the discovery of simple life on nearby Andorian colony worlds. Sometime after this, the Ferengi also discovered Andoria and demanded trade with them, which the Andorians agreed to. After this, the Andorians set out numerous colony ships to uncharted worlds in the hopes of forming their own interstellar empire, and all this happened before they developed warp drive. After this, Andoria managed to establish routine contact with the colony worlds that survived, and quickly created its own local power. The early first contact with the Romulans might go on to help explain why they were so distrusting of the Vulcans too when eventually they met in the 1950s. I still find it occasionally so strange to use historical dates to refer to sci-fi stuff. The Andorians themselves had long been standoffish, proud and militant. This translated into their contact with others, and it seemed that their early skirmish with the Romulan ship, then forced bartering with the Ferengi, made them eager to establish themselves as something to avoid picking a fight with. While neither of these events were as catastrophic as the Vulcan or Klingons' first brushes with alien life, the Andorians pretty much adopted a very defensive and strategic expansion in the following centuries. Bajor is a bit of a more difficult one to pin down their first encounter with sentient alien life. You could of course count the Prophets as their first meeting, but that seems disingenuous. After all, the Prophets have described themselves as of Bajor, and the Bajoran people regard them as part of their society for at least 30,000 years. So perhaps we can look into beta materials. In one reference, the Bajorans encountered the Varel in the 4th century, which skirmished with Bajor, but this would have all have been pre-warp. So let's knock out 2 entries with 1 instance of contact. According to canon, the Bajoran light ships, or solar sail vessels, were being used frequently to explore the heavens by the 1500s, and, in at least 1 instance, a light ship was caught in a tachyon eddy and accelerated to warp 1 on course for Cardassia. There, the ship exited warp and crashed into Cardassia Prime, completely by accident, making it the first contact with Bajorans that the Cardassians had. According to Beta Canon, this was the Cardassians' overall first contact too. The records around this age are muddied, thanks to the erasure of much Bajoran history from the Cardassians, and even the Cardassians in censoring of events in its own records. But it's suggested that this may have occurred more than once. One can only imagine what the Cardassian government thought about the sky occasionally raining surprised Bajoran scholars down onto Cardassia Prime. Just over 100 years later, Cardassia created its own warp drive and set out to explore, already aware of at least one other people, the Bajorans. It's not clear what early Cardassian goals were, but the Detapa Council had formed in the year 1870 and their militaristic turn was a gradual one forced by the mismanagement of their homeworld's limited resources, more so than any external fear or conquest. In fact, I would like to do a video exploring the turn of Cardassia, as even as late as the 23rd century, they were on respectable terms with even the United Federation of Planets. A tragedy of Cardassia is what its government, then military, did to its own people over time, to the point where the Union became the monster it was. Well, that took a dour turn, sorry. But there we have it. 6 first contacts from some of the most known aliens in Star Trek. What do you think? I tried looking into the Tellarites, but even in Apocrypha it seems vague as to exactly who they encountered first. It's interesting to see the influence that discovering other sentience had on a people, and more importantly the manner of this meeting, the variation between the Klingon and Vulcan takeaways from their less than ideal contacts in particular. So, until the next video, thanks again for watching. I've been Rick, and goodbye.